All right, let's just jump right into it. Welcome to this explainer, where today we are going to completely shatter how you typically think about software design. For a really long time, we've treated software as just a collection of inert objects, right? Passive things that we manipulate. But what if we completely flip that script? What if instead of manipulating dead data structures, we were actually speaking with autonomous characters? Today, we're exploring a massive conceptual shift, moving from reaching inside a machine to tinker with its gears to speaking directly with a living, acting character. Once you see your systems this way, you literally cannot unsee it.
So think about the traditional way we build software. We grab an object, and we literally reach our hands inside of it to mutate its state. We're physically touching its internal gears to make it do what we want. And hey, let's be fair, this works. But notice who is doing all the heavy lifting. You are. Now imagine the alternative. Instead of reaching in, what if we simply hand a request to a character? We don't touch anything inside. We aren't poking at variables. We're just talking to them, and they make the decision to act.
To really ground this, let's bring in our central character for today, the cashier, and we need to force a linguistic shift right here, right now. The cashier is not a what, the cashier is a who. From here on out, we use he or who because this is someone. This is an autonomous character who receives requests, makes his own decisions, acts on them, and completely owns his own history. We aren't dealing with a passive object called a register that any piece of code can just modify. No, we are dealing with a character who has a voice, a boundary, and a specific job to do.
Now, to actually bring the cashier to life and make him truly autonomous, we have to radically clean his environment. We're talking total purification of his domain. Inside the cashier's world, there is no database, there's no network, there isn't even a simple datetime.now or a console.write line. And you might be wondering, why go to that extreme? Because things like time and input-output are the external world's authority, not his. By stripping away absolutely all the infrastructure, what we are left with are pure, meaningful actions, pure verbs. Because his domain is so clean, how he interacts with the outside world is actually fascinating. He produces what we call a single print. The cashier only emits one pure action, just a single output describing exactly what he just did. He doesn't format it for a database, he doesn't format it for a web page. He just states his reality. It's the external observers who assign meaning to it. For example, that exact same print from the cashier might be interpreted by the government tax authority as a formal legal invoice, while the customer's mobile app interprets it as a friendly thank you email. The meaning is decided outside the domain by whoever is listening. Contrast this with our old habits. Before, if we wanted to register a sale, we forced an external mutation. We'd write something like KJ Mato plus 50. We controlled his interior, and honestly, if we messed up, the whole system broke. But now we don't touch him. We simply send a message, charge 50. We are talking to him. We hand him the request, and he decides to move his own internal abacus. We don't force the state change, we request it, and he executes his own internal logic. This fundamentally changes how the system communicates. Normally, we'd ask a passive data structure to describe itself, maybe using a toString method, but that data is blind. It has no idea who it's talking to or why. But the cashier? Because he is an actor, he speaks in an active first-person voice. He says, I charged a purchase of $50. The day's total is $50. He knows exactly what he just did. It's not a generic system log. It is the voice of a character recounting his own actions. So how does he pull this off under the hood? Well, he doesn't just act as a dumb bucket holding variables. His domain is made of clean, closed pieces. A sale piece knows its own amount. A workday piece knows how to accumulate totals. The cashier takes these closed pieces and composes them together in one unified act. When he performs his verb, when he actually charges the customer, he flexes these pieces together. We aren't copy-pasting messy procedural code, we're composing pure concepts into single, definitive actions.
But what if something goes wrong? Like a customer tries to pay, but they don't have enough money. In the traditional world, we do all this external validation, and if it failed halfway through, we'd be scrambling with database rollbacks to manually undo the mess. Not anymore. Now, the cashier himself stands guard. He evaluates the request. If the payment isn't enough, he simply refuses to act. And here's the kicker. Because he refuses, the event never happens. There's no half-baked transaction to clean up. A rejected act leaves absolutely zero trace. And this leads us to a complete revolution in how we handle state. We're so conditioned to think of state as passive storage, right? A static snapshot sitting in a database table, completely managed by ORMs. Forget all of that. Imagine instead that the cashier is holding a notebook. In this notebook, he records a living diary of verbs, a log of everything he has actually done. He isn't constantly overwriting his current total, he is remembering his actions. His state emerges from this history. The system doesn't just store data, it remembers what happened. Think about how resilient this is. Let's say the absolute worst happens. The power cuts out, the server crashes, the process dies. When the lights come back on, how does the cashier know where he left off? He doesn't run some complex query against a relational database. He just opens his notebook and rereads his own diary. He replays his history. Okay, morning, I charged a coffee. Noon, I charged bread. By reading what he did, he rebuilds his living state spontaneously. The storage exists, sure, but it's an external component. His memory is rebuilt purely from his actions. Which naturally brings up a really fun challenge. If the cashier only ever lives in the present moment, reading his diary to know his current state, what happens when a manager walks up and asks, "Hey, how much did you sell yesterday?" In a traditional system that just overwrites data, yesterday is literally gone. It's been erased by today. To answer that in the old paradigm, you'd need massive heavy machinery. You'd be building nightly ETL pipelines, dumping historical data into data warehouses, writing crazy SQL queries. But our cashier, he literally just turns the page back. Why? Because he doesn't need to ask an external database. He knows yesterday's total because he was explicitly designed to remember it. We programmed him to remember the events that we decided were important. He kept his book up to date. Memory here is intentional. It's a deliberate characteristic of the actor, not some accidental byproduct of your database. And the flexibility you get from this is just insane. Let's say business rules change and we need to stop selling to people on a blacklist. The old way, you'd wedge a giant if statement deep inside some global sales service, totally tangling it up with everything else. The new way, we just compose a new blacklist piece into the cashier. Boom. Instantly, the cashier gains the spontaneous, autonomous power to reject defaulters. The core logic of what a sale is never changed. We just gave the character a new capability by composing it in. So, if the cashier is entirely focused on acting in the present, who's handling all the heavy reporting? That's where the puppeteer comes in. The puppeteer is a piece of infrastructure that lives entirely outside the clean domain. Its only job is to read the cashier's diary and narrate that history for the outside world. If you need a printed receipt, a live web dashboard, or a data feed for an AI model, the puppeteer reads the exact same history and tells the story. The cashier acts, the puppeteer accounts. When you zoom out, you see that every character in this architecture is what we'd call an island of consistency in a sea of concurrency. The cashier is perfectly safe on his own little island. He evaluates his rules, he guards his actions, he writes in his diary, totally isolated from whatever else is happening in the system. There are no shared database locks dragging him down. Because remember, he's not alone. What we are really building is a bustling, autonomous ecosystem of different characters. You have the cashier ringing up customers at the front. You have the shopkeeper in the warehouse managing inventory. You have the accountant in the back office closing out the month. They are all who's, and they all operate concurrently, maintaining their own isolated consistency, managing their own diaries, and they never, ever step on each other's toes. I want you to picture it like this, because this is where it all clicks together. We aren't just writing mechanical lines of code anymore. We are assembling a biological system. The pure domain logic, those clean, closed rules, those are the muscles. The infrastructure, the databases, the puppeteer reading the diary, those are the nerves. But the cashier himself, he is the body that actually acts, moves, and lives. We are achieving true ontological closure here. We are bringing something to life. And that requires a massive cognitive shift from us as developers. The old questions we used to ask were so mechanical. We'd sit down and say, okay, what method do I call, or where in the database do I save this? We need to elevate that. Now we ask, who can do this, and what history actually deserves to be kept? We aren't mutating data structures anymore. We are designing roles, allocating responsibilities, and crafting intentional memories. Which leaves us with one final, unavoidable realization. Software is not made of objects that we manipulate. It is made of actors who decide. So the very next time you sit down to architect a system, you have to ask yourself a serious question. Are you just building mechanical machines, or are you bringing characters to life? Talk to the character, send the order, don't put your hand in it.